He was the most outstanding master of martial arts, actor, director, and screenwriter. A person who became a living legend thanks to his talent, determination, and hard work. He had exceptional energy and a powerful life force that attracted millions of followers from all over the world. He was respected by athletes, adored by moviegoers, and admired by women. However, the path to worldwide recognition of this legendary actor was incredibly thorny and full of daily struggle for the right to be heard. Today, we decided to open the veil of his life. Why did Bruce have a female name as a child? What could young Lee have gone to prison for? What obstacles stood on his way to Hollywood? And what sacrifices did the star make for the sake of art? You will learn about this and much more from this video, so get comfortable. This is Biographer, and we are starting. Bruce Lee was born on November 27, 1940 in San Francisco, California. His father, Li Huichun, a Chinese opera star, was there on tour in the United States at the time. He was accompanied on the trip by his pregnant wife, Grace Ho, a Chinese woman with German roots. When it became clear that the birth could begin any day, Li Hui left his wife at the San Francisco clinic and continued his tour. The baby was born between 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and in medieval Asian time, this interval was called the Dragon's Hour. Since 1940 was also the Year of the Dragon, he would later be known as Li Shuilong, meaning Little Dragon. However, the newborn had several more names. The birth certificate issued at the clinic listed the child as Bruce Lee. The fact is that the doctor who delivered a baby advised the mother to name the boy an American name, and Grace agreed. She also named the baby Li Zhongfa, which is translated from Chinese as "go back," and all because the woman really wanted her son to return to America when he grew up. Fortunately, the boy was born with dual citizenship of Hong Kong and the United States, which in the future would be a decisive factor in his relocation. Bruce met his first-time film camera even before he learned to crawl. There was Esther Ng, one of the first film directors who specialized in patriotic war films among his dad's American friends. For several scenes in Golden Gate Girl, she needed a newborn baby girl and asked Huichun to cast Bruce in the role. In one brief scene, 2-month-old Lee, wearing a lace hat and a girl's blouse, is rocked in a wicker cradle. In another, the baby screams inconsolably with closed eyes, open mouth, and flailing arms. This was Bruce's first and last experience of dressing as a female. As the boy was too young to travel, the Lee family overstayed by 5 months. Huichun and Grace did not see their other children for almost a year and a half. They were eager to return home, but worried that Bruce would not be allowed to return to the United States afterward. Therefore, Huichun and Grace were made to turn to lawyers to settle the matter with the U.S. Immigration Service. In her native Hong Kong, 70-year-old grandmother Lee was waiting for her son and daughter-in-law. For 18 months, she took care of the couple's older children, daughters Phoebe and Agnes, and son Peter, as well as a widowed daughter-in-law and her 5 children. They were all crammed into a tiny 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. Everyone was happy to meet a new member of the family. Lee's grandmother called him Saifeng, Small Phoenix, the female counterpart of the dragon in Chinese mythology, to protect him from ghosts and snake spirits that like to hurt little boys. The excitement of the family reunion was soon overshadowed by the war, and after some time, the family was also made to fight for the life of young Bruce. Born in the mild climate of San Francisco, the chubby baby fell seriously ill in Hong Kong. The boy became so weak and thin that his parents feared he would die. Grace, who had already lost her first son, constantly looked after Bruce. I think I spoiled him during that terrible illness. Because of his illness, which could have been fatal, Bruce grew up weaker and sicker than other children. By the age of 4, he could not walk without stumbling. Due to harsh living conditions, hunger, and repression, a large part of the population of Hong Kong was forced to flee, mainly to Macau, a neighboring Portuguese colony. Li Huichun was the sole breadwinner in a family of 13. If he had to run to Macau, it was unlikely that all the family members would survive, especially the younger Bruce, who barely recovered from a serious illness. Fortunately for Huichun and his relatives, the Japanese had come to love Chinese opera. The head of the Japanese Ministry of Propaganda, Wakada Kosuke, made the singer an offer he couldn't refuse. Huichun's work gave his family a little more status than other citizens. Soon, the family was able to buy a larger apartment with an area of 4,300 square feet, extremely spacious by Hong Kong standards. Over the next 2 years, Huichun prudently bought 4 more apartments at a discounted price and rented them out. However, the family still lived in not very comfortable conditions. There was a large table where they ate, played, and read. It had the only room in which all of the family members slept. Water was supplied to the house once a week for a few hours, and therefore it had to be collected and stored. So the family didn't know what a bath was, and the 40-degree heat in Hong Kong was not conducive to constant cleanliness and hygiene. But most Chinese lived even worse, so Hui Chun's family had nothing to complain about. After the end of the war, many immigrants returned to Hong Kong, and within a few years, the population increased significantly. As for Bruce, the sickness and weakness that had disturbed him during the occupation were gone. He became very hyperactive, constantly on the move, jumping, talking, and playing. His older brother Peter recalled that when Bruce was silent for long periods, his mother thought he was ill. The boy often ran around the city, made friends with not very good companies, stole apples from the trays of street vendors, and questioned everything that adults asked him to do. The parents found the only way out: how to calm down their son. They gave him comics. Bruce could read for hours in silence. He started with kung fu stories and progressed to novels about martial arts, knights, and sorcerers, spending most of his free time in bookstores. Bruce read so much that he started wearing glasses at the age of 6. The Civil War that continued after the liberation of China forced many Shanghai artists to move to Hong Kong. Foreign films were banned, and the film industry was set on producing propaganda films that were censored by the state. By 1950, Hong Kong had become the Hollywood of the East, the center of Chinese cinema. In these conditions, Hui Chun took advantage of the boom in film production and began to actively participate in filming. He often took his children to the set. Bruce liked it the most and was delighted with the filming process and the equipment. When the boy was 6 years old, the director of the film in which Hui Chun starred saw him on the set and was so impressed by Bruce that he offered him a small role. Thus, at a conscious age, Lee's first experience in the cinema was the portrayal of a pickpocket in the film The Birth of Mankind, which was released in 1946. Although the picture failed at the box office, it later defined a characteristic type for Bruce: a tough and cunning street boy with a heart of gold. The guy often played such characters at the childhood stage of his career. In the next film, Wealth is Like a Dream in 1948, he again became a boy abandoned after the war. Hui Chun also starred in this film, and the promoters, seeking to capitalize on the family connection and father's popularity, gave Bruce a new stage name, Young Hui Chun. Newspapers advertised, "In an episodic role, child prodigy Young Hui Chun." So Bruce's career began in the shadow of his father's fame, and the son would spend the rest of his life trying to surpass him. Do you think it is difficult to be the child of a famous star? Write in the comments. We're interested to know your opinion. The first opportunity to surpass the famous dad was Bruce's 5th film, Kid Chung, which was then called simply The Kid. Shot in 1950. Based on Yuen Boiwan's popular comic book, the picture was considered a serious, big-budget effort. Director Feng Feng cast several children, but none suited the role of Chung. Once he saw Bruce's previous works, he decided that the boy was perfect for this project. The director personally visited the Lee family home to get Hui Chun's consent, but to his surprise, the man refused. The main role in a big film threatened to turn a hobby into a full-fledged career, and the father was not sure that he wanted to see his son as an actor. He hoped that his children would get a profession not related to art. They would become doctors, lawyers, or bankers. The director persuaded Hui Chun for a long time, and when none of the arguments worked, offered him the lead role in the movie so that he could look after his son during filming. Hui Chun finally agreed, and this decision changed Bruce's life. It was to this film that the boy owed his new nickname. Formerly known as Young Hui Chun, this time he was listed as Li Lung, or Lili. Given his diminutive stature, the name was quickly changed to Li Xiulong, Little Dragon Li. Bruce loved his nickname so much that he insisted on using it in real life. From that time, all his friends began to call him that. The Kid was released at the end of May 1950. It was well received by both the public and critics. The idea of a sequel immediately appeared in the plans, but Bruce's father forbade his son to appear in it. The boy was becoming the same uncontrollable rebel as his characters in the movies. Hui Chun always kept a close eye on his son. He often took Bruce fishing or backstage during stage performances. Around the age of 7, Bruce went to the Royal Park with his father for joint Tai Chi classes to strengthen his body, which became the boy's first style of martial arts and a test of his patience. Bruce's mother, Grace, being a devout Catholic and wanting her children to receive an excellent education, enrolled them in the best Catholic schools in Hong Kong. Grace's sons received their primary education at Tak Sun School, a parochial school for boys. Bruce went to school at the age of 6. He was physically weaker than the other boys and still had problems with coordination after a childhood illness. The boy could not even learn to ride a bicycle. And after the incident in the pool where the sisters held him underwater to punish him for bad behavior, Lee began to be terrified of water and did not dare to swim. Due to severe myopia, Bruce had to wear thick glasses and his ear was pierced. This image of him was simply suitable for mocking classmates. But the boy did not tolerate contemptuous treatment and entered into a fight with anyone who insulted or humiliated him. He fought with everyone until he earned a reputation as a guy you better not touch. At first, Bruce only defended himself from insults, but later he began to like fighting and often incited his classmates to fight. He's gone from a guy not to be trifled with to someone best avoided. Parents began to warn their sons to stay away from Bruce. Then, he organized his own gang. Little Dragon didn't follow orders. He gave them out. His classmates said that he had 5 or 6 followers who carried out his orders. 2 of them remained faithful to him all their lives. Wu Nyan was the son of a chief servant in the Lee family. The boys grew up together and were like brothers. Wu Nyan later became Bruce's personal servant and confidant. The second faithful follower was Unicorn Chan, a young actor whom Bruce met on the set of the film The Birth of Mankind. Studying did not inspire him at all. Lee was very restless and could not concentrate on the subject. Although the boy liked to read comics and novels about martial arts, he hated textbooks, refusing to open them and do homework. Bad grades and constant conflicts with peers forced his parents to reconsider their views on upbringing. Little Dragon was banned from acting in movies until his behavior at school improved. After much persuasion, in 1951 he participated in the movie Early Childhood. However, the boy's behavior did not improve after that, and there was a 2-year break in Bruce's career. After finishing primary school, Bruce was sent to LaSalle College. The great advantage of the school was that the entire program was taught in English, and therefore the students were bilingual after graduation. Without the education he had at LaSalle, Bruce Lee would have never succeeded in Hollywood, where English knowledge was mandatory, especially for actors from Asia. By the way, English was one of the few subjects in which Bruce excelled. Other classes he simply copied from his classmates. After a 2-year break in filming, Bruce's parents reluctantly obeyed their son's pleas to revive his acting career. Hui Chun and Grace hoped that the band would force their son to focus on his studies, but it was all in vain. Bruce's grades and behavior only worsened. In 1953, Lee joined a group of top Cantonese directors, actors, and writers who had formed their own production company, Union Film Enterprises Ltd., the year before. They aimed to create high-quality, socially responsible films. In all the movies, the same actors were filmed, the basis of which was adults and the teenager Bruce. The guy usually played secondary roles and averaged 20 minutes of screen time, and spoke about 30 lines. For the most part, the shootings were short. They lasted about 12 days. But the pay for the young actor was not so bad. If converted to modern amounts, Bruce received $2,000 per film. It was then that his habit of buying extravagant things was formed. Once he even bought a monkey that lived in their home for a long time. However, one day it bit his younger brother Robert, and it had to be given away. The first film of the Union Film Enterprises company in which Bruce starred was called The Guiding Light and became a successful start of cooperation with the studio. Between 1953 and 1955, Bruce appeared in 10 more films. These 3 years were the most fruitful in the actor's career and included almost half of all his works. However, the small roles of that time cemented his status as a typical actor rather than a star. Union Film Enterprises gave the boy an important lesson in how to make quality films on serious topics. Work in this company also influenced Bruce's future life. He grew up wanting to make patriotic, educational films about China's cultural heritage. Unfortunately, the creative company did not last long. 3 years later, internal quarrels separated the participants. Bruce found that the search for roles became more difficult left without a creative and fruitful team. Over the next 5 years, he starred in only 5 films, and his rebellious nature began to show off again. From boyhood to adolescence, I presented myself as a troublemaker and was greatly disapproved of by my elders. I was extremely mischievous, aggressive, hot-tempered, and fierce. In 1956, after 5 years of study, Bruce was expelled from LaSalle. And it is not surprising because he was a terrible student who stayed for the second year twice. Furthermore, he constantly fought and caused trouble for classmates and teachers. And while Lee could be charming and the Jesuits saw some inner goodness in him, his cruel behavior was the last straw. After Bruce's mother called several acquaintances, her troubled 15-year-old son was enrolled at St. Francis Xavier's College. Compared to LaSalle, this institution was more like a penitentiary. The discipline here was stricter, and the school adhered to the Spartan style of education. Bruce became a real test for the monastic brotherhood. Despite a promise to his parents to make amends, he and his gang were still looking for adventure. The guy was smart and absolutely fearless. Most of all, he won the fights, but he hated losing so much that he decided to improve his skills. Then his school friend William Cheung introduced him to Ip Man, a former police inspector who opened his own martial arts school. At first, Lee was denied training because of the long-standing rule against training foreigners. His mother's one-quarter European ancestry was an initial obstacle to training. Still, William managed to persuade the coach, and Lee was accepted into the school, where he began to study the tough and aggressive Wing Chun Kung Fu. There was running for 3 miles and hundreds of push-ups, endless kicking of a punching bag, acrobatics, full-contact fights, and all this hardened Bruce. He trained 6 times a week. As his older brother Peter recalled, he turned into a real fanatic. Even when he was alone in the room, he improved the techniques again and again in front of the mirror. Ip Man's other students were unhappy with Bruce as he progressed rapidly in his skill and made fun of them. After a year of training in the art of Wing Chun, most students refused to train with Lee when they learned of his mixed ancestry, as the Chinese were generally opposed to teaching their martial arts techniques to non-Asians. So, for the above reasons in the future, Bruce had to train with Ip Man's student Wang Shongliang, and then with his friend William. There was nothing surprising in Lee's constant desire to be first. Ip Man constantly pitted his students against each other. After school, the boys would go to the Shek Kip Mai area in search of adventure. They earned a reputation as the worst baddies on the street. Unfortunately, this behavior quickly attracted the police attention. Bruce was placed on the police list of juvenile offenders. To avoid the control of authorities, the boys left the streets and climbed onto the roofs, where they had secret battles against rival kung fu schools. As Bruce progressed quickly, it was his turn to participate in one of these battles. Once provoked by his classmates, Bruce challenged an assistant instructor from a rival school, Choi Li Fut, to a duel. Although it was a friendly match, which consisted of only 2 rounds, Bruce managed to knock out several teeth of his opponent, while remaining with a bruised eye. As Bruce's Wing Chun skills improved, he began to teach a group of his followers at St. Francis Xavier College. He practiced moves on the playground and instructed interested classmates during breaks. These short sessions were spotted by the school's athletic director, Brother Edward, a German missionary and former professional boxer. It was he who encouraged the boy to join the newly formed school boxing team and take part in the inter-school boxing tournament. Bruce had only a few months to prepare for the championship. Brother Edward gave him a crash course in the basics of boxing, and Bruce also turned to Wang for instructions on how to adjust his Wing Chun technique for the gloves and no-kicks contest. So Wang worked on Lee's weaknesses and taught him how to take full advantage of his strengths. Bruce got up at 7 a.m. every morning and started the day with a run of 3 to 6 miles. Then he was engaged in muscle development, boxing, and training with a punching bag. At the same time, he used different types of punching bags, practicing alternately the speed of the blow, strength, and accuracy. As a result, Lee won the school boxing tournament in Hong Kong in 1958, knocking out previous champion Gary Elms in the final. Bruce continued to fight on the streets and rooftops of Hong Kong, but this tournament was the first and last officially organized sporting event in which he participated. He didn't like how the rules limited the effectiveness of his methods. As he got older and better at martial arts, Bruce studiously avoided boxing and karate tournaments and only accepted if challenged. One day, Lee got into a fight with members of the Asian crime syndicate Triad. Fearing revenge on her son, Grace offered Bruce, being an American citizen, to return to the United States. So, in 1959, the young man found himself in America again. Bruce was welcomed by America like any other of the millions of immigrants, but he had an advantage: knowledge of the English language and understanding of the rules of life in a big city. He managed to find an accommodation and get a job. At first, he stayed in San Francisco with his father's friend and earned some money by giving dance lessons. Yes, you heard it right. Bruce was not only a master of Oriental martial arts, he also danced in Hong Kong, and a year before coming to America, he even won the Cha-Cha-Cha Championship. Then, Ruby Chow, a restaurant owner in Seattle, offered him a job as a waiter and a place to stay. Bruce jumped at this opportunity and moved to Seattle. During the day, the young man studied language and mathematics, and in the evening, he worked. All this was necessary for him to enter college. As a result, he entered the Edison Technical School on Capitol Hill in Seattle. In the evenings, Lee worked in a restaurant, often combining this with work at the Seattle Times newspaper, where he sometimes designed pages with advertisements and various announcements. Despite his busy schedule, Bruce did not give up sports, but on the contrary, devoted all his free time to training. He mastered a wide variety of kung fu, jiu-jitsu, and judo techniques, and instead of dummies for sparring, he used trees in the park, wrapping them in blankets. He also managed to hang a punching bag in the corner of the kitchen of the restaurant where he worked, and there, as long as there were no customers, he practiced kung fu. At Edison School, Bruce finally made himself sit down at the natural sciences and take up those fields of knowledge that he had previously ignored. At the same time, Lee continued to study history and philosophy with pleasure. After graduating from high school, he received a diploma with good grades in all subjects, which gave him the right to enter the University of Washington. Parents could finally be proud of their troubled son. During his studies, Bruce met a young American woman of Swedish origin, Linda Emery, who attended his kung fu lessons. The first time I saw Bruce was in the spring of 1963. At the time, I was studying at Garfield High School in Seattle. Bruce, being then a student at the University of Washington, came to our school for lectures on Eastern philosophy, and I often saw him walking along the corridor and always with some girl. I've been told that since the age of 15, Bruce has never had any difficulty in communicating with girls. Of course, Linda did not yet respect that she had fallen in love with a charismatic young man, because she was only 17. In fact, the girl was one of the crowd of students who came to him to learn kung fu and also to listen to his teachings. Bruce was an extrovert by nature, loved to perform in front of an audience, and did all this with a childlike directness and cheerful frankness.
But I think what you speak to is really amazing, like his energy, his dynamism, his power, his essence, and how comfortable he was in his skin and the way he just sort of occupied space fully is phenomenal.
Despite his self-confidence, Bruce rarely behaved rudely or arrogantly, and in personal communication showed softness and honesty. He always sought to disarm a person with the directness and sincerity of his behavior, with his humor. Recalling Lee's endless energy and boundless enthusiasm, his friend and lawyer Adrian Marshall said, Bruce seemed to get more out of each day than there was in it. His minutes were, like fuller minutes. He never seemed to be goofing off. Mentally and physically, he didn't waste any time and any sense. His club was located in Seattle's Chinatown. Lee planned to open a whole chain of kung fu schools in the United States. He didn't even try to advertise his club, so there weren't any signs above the door that were typical of karate schools. He hoped that his school's reputation would be high enough that word of mouth would do what was necessary to promote it. He wanted to teach only those who, having a great desire to understand the technique of kung fu, would also be ready to accept the philosophical ideas embedded in this art. The key idea in his teaching was the philosophy of water. Once in his youth, after meditating and exercising, Bruce went swimming. On the sea, I thought of all my past training and got mad at myself and punched the water, Lee said. Right then at that moment, a thought suddenly struck me. Was not this water the very essence of Kung Fu? Hasn't this water just now illustrated to me the principle of Kung Fu? I struck it, but it did not suffer hurt. Lee then realized that water was the softest substance in the world that could be contained in the smallest jug. It only seemed weak. In fact, it could penetrate the hardest substance. Then he realized that he wanted to be like water.
Well, Kung Fu, the best example would be a glass of water. Why? Because water is the softest substance in the world, but yet it can penetrate the hardest rock or anything, granite, you name it. Water also is insubstantial. By that I mean you cannot grasp hold of it. You cannot punch it and hurt it. So every Kung Fu man is trying to do that, to be soft like water and flexible and adapt itself to the opponent.
When Lee's followers were free from lectures, they spent a great deal of time practicing techniques. They usually did this on the lawn near the university building. When Bruce demonstrated another technique to students, he always explained the philosophical principles behind what he called Tao Kung Fu. After classes, they all went somewhere together, more often to a movie or a cafe to have a snack. I remember that when I first knew him, he would often bring everything in the Students' Union cafeteria to a sudden stop. Although I've explained that Bruce was an extrovert and enjoyed giving a performance, he was unquestionably a born showman. It was not that he was deliberately trying to draw attention to himself. At the same time, Linda began attending a preparatory course at the university and thus could meet him more often. They met almost every day in the student club. When they were not at lectures, the young woman was always in the group of those who constantly followed him everywhere. Lee was a kind of guru for the students. Spending time with him was always interesting and fun for everyone. Any topic became the subject of discussion, many of which were quite complex and serious. By the end of October 1963, Linda and Bruce had never been alone. Once, while practicing kung fu near the school, he invited her to the Space Needle restaurant. Although Bruce didn't like to wear suits because of how uncomfortable he felt with them on, he was wearing a fancy suit and a purple shirt that day. He gave Linda a small Swedish doll with two tails, because this was the hairstyle the young woman wore more often. It turned out to be a very romantic evening. Everything was perfect. We talked about Bruce's background and early life, which I found fascinating. We also discussed philosophy and psychology, another subject he was working on at college. Bruce also shared his plans for organizing a whole chain of kung fu schools. By that time, he had already moved to another, more spacious studio where there was equipment necessary for training, and it had a school emblem above the entrance door. Even then, he was sure that he would be able to earn a living by teaching kung fu. Very quickly, the martial arts master and the 18-year-old beauty had sympathy, which gradually turned into love. Today, when I reflect on our courtship, she said, I believe that it was our very differences in race, culture, upbringing, tradition, and customs that were largely instrumental in bringing us even closer together. In July 1964, Linda had to make a life-changing decision. The fact is that Bruce had come to the conclusion that kung fu lessons in Seattle did not bring him enough money. He considered California to be the city where his dreams would come true. When Bruce first returned to America from Hong Kong, he stopped in Oakland where he met with the master of a number of martial arts, James Yim Lee. James was much older than Bruce and had many years of experience, but he was so intrigued by the young man's skill and his methods that he immediately became his first student, even though Lee was only 18 at the time. Now Bruce met with James, having flown back to Oakland, and suggested that the two of them open a school in this city. Lee was so enthusiastic about the prospects for the development of Kung Fu in America that he decided to abandon further education and began to bring his plans to life. As long as I can remember, I feel I have had this great creative and spiritual force within me that is greater than faith, greater than ambition, greater than confidence, greater than determination, greater than vision. It is all these combined. My brain becomes magnetized with this dominating force which I hold in my hand. Before leaving, he told Linda that if his plan worked, he would probably stay in Oakland for a while, and that way they would have the opportunity to seriously consider whether to get married or say goodbye forever. When Bruce returned to Seattle, he proposed to Linda. Her mother was not happy with this choice, as Lee was Chinese American and Catholic, but religion was never a cornerstone for Bruce's free nature, so the newlyweds were married in a local Protestant church, the same place where Linda's grandmother was also married at one time. Everything happened so quickly that the bride did not even wear a wedding dress. Despite everything, the newlyweds were happy and ready to start their family life in another city. For Bruce's old friends, this marriage was a real surprise. In Hong Kong, he was quite popular among girls who often flirted with the charismatic young man. Linda, on the other hand, was a timid, calm, and affectionate young woman, which markedly differed from Lee's usual girlfriends. However, for his family, such a choice was quite logical. Actually, Peter said, Bruce knew she would take good care of him. Ahead lay an exciting period of struggle, of hard work and frustration, phases of high euphoria and moments of near despair and despondency. There were times when we were not to have a lot of money, times when it seemed that success was just around the corner. In many ways, it was an unsettling life. Their first home was James Lee's house in Oakland, California. His wife just died and left him with 2 children. Linda took care of the house and children. Jun Fan Martial Arts Studio, which was organized by Bruce and James on Broadway, functioned quite successfully, and although Bruce earned no more than a few $100s a month, the family expenses were even less. However, from the beginning of his career, Bruce encountered a hostile attitude towards him from the members of the Chinese community in San Francisco, especially those who practiced martial arts.
Bruce was teaching a great many non-Chinese. They were not just Caucasian, they were Black or Hispanic or women or just a whole variety of people. He knew that there was this taboo, but he did not agree with it. It was not taken well. They wanted to shut down this egotistical, brash youngster. So a date was set, and eventually they came over.
A few months later, after Bruce and James started teaching Kung Fu, the Kung Fu master Wang Jiakman came to their school and gave an ultimatum. He challenged Lee to a duel, and if Bruce lost it, he would close his studio or stop teaching white people. He accepted the terms, which was a real surprise for Wang, because he only wanted to scare his opponent. Linda was 8 months pregnant at that time. I suppose I ought to have been nervous, yet the truth is that I could not have been calmer. I was not in the least concerned for Bruce. I was absolutely certain that he could take care of himself. I may have even smiled a little, realizing that none of these men, apparently, had any real inkling of how dangerous Bruce really could be. Of course, after a few minutes, Wang begged his opponent to stop. It was an easy victory. Since then, the community has never again attempted to directly threaten Bruce. But a year later, Al Dacascos opened his own school in San Francisco and, like Bruce, began to teach everyone who wanted to. The Chinese clans then decided to sow enmity between them by spreading rumors that each spoke disrespectfully of the other. The enemies hoped that eventually either Bruce or Al would lose patience and one of them would force the other to close their school. However, at one of the competitions, the men met and talked. The confrontation, which the clan hoped for, did not bring the desired result for them. At times, it seemed that Bruce had superhuman abilities. He was the only person to break a 100-pound punching bag with a sidekick. Lee could also kick 6 times in 1 second, and his signature move, skip sidekick, could knock a 200-foot person off the ground with protective armor. One of his most famous tricks was the 1-inch punch, which he punched from a distance of 1 inch to the target. Bruce stood opposite the assistant in such a way that his right leg was in front and the left one 11 to 16 inches behind. Bruce's clenched fist was an inch from the opponent's chest. All the audience could see was the faint movement of Bruce's body forward while the heel of his left foot rose. Bruce made such a powerful blow by rotating his hips that the assistant, having received it, flew several meters to the enthusiastic shouts of the audience. Furthermore, according to available data, Lee could do about 1,500 push-ups with both hands in one sitting, 400 on one hand, 200 on 2 fingers, and 100 on 1 thumb. When he demonstrated his ability to push up from the floor with only his thumbs, there was nothing directly related to Kung Fu in this ability. He simply wanted to show to what level of physical capabilities he had brought his body through constant training. In 1964, at an international tournament in California, Bruce was invited to demonstrate his art. The audience was amazed by the technique of his performance, and it was captured on camera. One of the audience members that day was Hollywood hair and makeup artist Jay Sebring. He was impressed by what he saw, and when he was doing the hair of television producer William Dozier a few months later, he remembered Bruce's name. Dozier said he was looking for an actor to play Charlie Chan's son in the new No. 1 Son series. William watched a recording of Bruce's performance and invited the man to audition in Los Angeles. He flew and was approved for the role. The money that Bruce received for signing him to the cast was very appropriate. After all, the son of the lead couple, Brandon, was born in February 1965, a week before the death of Bruce's father. Furthermore, the Kung Fu studio in Oakland did not bring the kind of profits that Bruce and James dreamed of. There was actually a reason for this. The fact was that Bruce was a man who recognized only the highest quality in any work, so he was determined to admit only serious, talented students to the school whom he could spend his time on without any regret. But Bruce was no less demanding of himself. He never seemed to relax. When an idea popped into his brain, he grabbed it and immediately wrote it down in his notebook. He couldn't even read a book without doing something else at the time. Linda often saw him in his room with a book in one hand and a dumbbell in the other. Besides, 20th Century Fox arranged for Lee to take acting lessons from teacher Jeff Corey. For Bruce, these activities turned out to be quite enough. Hoping for a future job in television, Bruce decided to move to Los Angeles immediately. The money he received from the film company, $800, was quite a surprise, but it was still not enough for a young family. Then Bruce decided to open a Kung Fu school again, this time in the City of Angels, not forgetting about his own training and maintaining a good physical shape. It was in Los Angeles that Lee began to show an increased interest in high-calorie foods and drinks containing a large amount of protein. Several times a day, he made himself a cocktail of milk, eggs, mashed eggshells, bananas, oil, and chocolate ice cream. He also drank many different mixtures, which he prepared from vegetables and fruits. As a rule, Bruce bought all his protein-rich foods from specialized stores aimed at athletes. He loved meat seasoned with all kinds of sauces and spices, and also took all the necessary vitamins and soon became very good at them, perfectly aware of the dangerous side of this hobby. As a true Chinese man, Lee loved rice, of course, but he didn't know how to cook it at all, so Linda did it for him. Strangely enough, for all his abilities, Lee was practically helpless in ordinary household affairs. He did not know at all, and perhaps did not even try to learn how to work with this or that tool. Any handyman work was an unsolvable task for him, and if something in the house went out of order, the couple simply called someone for help. Very quickly, Linda discovered that life with her husband was not so cloudless. He had his share of the ordinary human weaknesses. For example, he had a very fiery temper, and I think that perhaps he was very fortunate in finding himself being driven to take up Kung Fu as a boy, for it enabled him to find a release for his frustrations and challenged his easily sparked anger. If something made Bruce impatient, he just exploded. Once, when a young couple bought a huge bed, they tried to install it themselves. After several dozen of unsuccessful attempts, the man's patience gave out. He grabbed the huge spring mattress lying next to the bed and slammed it against the wall with such force that the plaster fell off. The couple was waiting for messages from Dozier, but work on the film Son No. 1 kept getting delayed. The family returned to Seattle and then lived with James Lee in Oakland. In March 1966, they finally returned to Los Angeles and settled in a tiny apartment on Wilshire Boulevard. At that time, Dozier's dream to realize the idea of the previous film was already completely rejected. But the director hoped for the success of his new project, the show The Green Hornet. Based on the success of a series of radio programs launched in the 1930s, The Green Hornet was supposed to show the adventures of Britt Reed, a journalist, publicist, and editor who wore green clothes at night and turned into a crime fighter. Bruce, who played the role of Kato, Britt Reed's bodyguard and assistant, found himself famous in one night. Later, Bruce, laughing, told one of the reporters, "I was chosen for the role of Kato in The Green Hornet because I was the only Chinese man to correctly pronounce Britt Reed." The show consisted of 30 episodes. Bruce later said that he thought the series was too straightforward. Britt Reed and Kato always had no more than half an hour to deal with the villains. There were many different characters in this series, so most of the time there was complete confusion on the screen. And although adults found the story too far-fetched and artificial, children fell in love with Bruce's character. Even critics noted the sensationalism of Kung Fu performed by the actor. In fact, the show director originally wanted Lee to fight in a typical American style, using fists and punches. But being a professional martial artist, Lee refused, insisting that he should fight in his own style. As a result, everyone was stunned by the actor's technique and the lightning speed of his movements. In fact, he was forced to slow down his punches so that the camera could capture them. Like this video, if you consider our today's star to be a master of his craft. After the Green Hornet's success, Bruce had a crowd of fans, and besides, his family's financial affairs had noticeably improved. The actor was already paid $400 a week, and later the couple was able to buy a house in the cozy area of Los Angeles' Upper Bel Air. However, money bothered the young movie star the least. In fact, he wanted to achieve a higher level in what he did. Even before he became famous, he felt himself the equal of everyone else around him, and he never felt any sense of inferiority because he was Chinese or because he wasn't a millionaire. Much of this may have had something to do with the fact that he knew he was going to be a great success one day. After shooting one season of Green Hornet, Lee found himself without a job for a while, but he did not sit still and was engaged in his Institute of Martial Arts, the Junfeng Kung Fu Institute, which he opened back in the 60s. At that time in his life, Bruce concluded that the techniques of traditional martial arts were too rigid and formalized to be practical in chaotic street fighting scenarios. Lee decided to design the system with an emphasis on practicality, flexibility, speed, and efficiency. He started using different training methods such as strength training, running for endurance, stretching for flexibility, and many others which he constantly adapted, including fencing and basic boxing techniques. The stunts that Bruce liked to perform in public were really exciting. His American lawyer, Adrian Marshall, talked about the coin trick like this. "Bruce put this dime in my hand and then said, 'Let's see how fast you are.' When I reach out for that dime, you close your fist and see if you can stop me from getting it. The first 2 times, Adrian managed to make a fist before Bruce could grab the coin. The third time, everything seemed to move a bit faster, but when I closed my fist, I still had that dime tightly clutched. Or at least I thought I had. When I opened my fist, not only had the dime gone, there was a penny lying in my hand instead. And this was just one of his tricks. Bruce believed that no style was a true style. Lee even found the system which he called Zhongfeng Gong Fu, too restrictive, and eventually evolved it into a philosophy and martial art he called Jeet Kune Do, or the way of the intercepting fist. Such celebrities as Steve McQueen, Chuck Norris, Joe Louis, Kadeem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Garner were among Lee's students. With the latter in 1969, Bruce starred in the film Marlowe, where he played a bully hired to intimidate the private detective Philip Marlowe, played by James.
Mr. Marlowe, I have my instructions.
Well, that's just exactly what I'm counting on, Winslow.
That same year, he was cast as a karate advisor in The Wrecking Crew, the 4th installment of Phil Carson's spy comedy starring Dean Martin. Lee also starred in an episode of 2 series, Here Come the Brides and Blondie. In the personal life of the star, meanwhile, there was an addition to the family. Linda gave birth to a daughter, Shannon. In 1970, Bruce was responsible for the fight choreography for A Walk in the Spring Rain, starring Ingrid Bergman and Anthony Quinn, written by another Lee student, Sterling Silliphant. It was then that the actor injured his lower back. Terrible pain did not leave him for 3 months. Only books were saving him at that time. He had thousands of books. They were all over his house and even overflowed into the garage. I thought it amazing that such a young man had read so much, which was why when you talked to him, you found his vocabulary so amazing. Bruce learned philosophy from the books of such authors as Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu. At the same time, he also read all the works of Jiddu Krishnamurti. Later, in developing his Jeet Kune Do method, Lee used some of the ideas he read from his books. The following year, the actor starred in 4 episodes of the television series Longstreet by the same Silliphant. Lee played Lee Sung, the martial arts instructor of the main character, Mike Longstreet, played by James Franciscus. And important aspects of his martial arts philosophy were written into the script. The reviews in the press were almost all excellent. They were quite different from those that Bruce received for the role of Kato. At the same time, his kung fu technique was defined as something completely new and awesome, but Bruce, as an actor, was completely ignored. This time, the emphasis was on the acting talent of the star, which pleased him immensely. From that moment on, events accelerated dramatically. Bruce had more fans than the performer of the main role, James Franciscus. Hollywood studios and their producers eventually noticed Bruce. Warner Bros. Decided to shoot a multi-part TV movie about kung fu. Bruce came up with a plot that described the adventures of a monk of the Shaolin Monastery in America and joined the work on the film. He offered many interesting ideas that formed the basis of the movie, which received the most favorable reviews from the audience. The film was called Kung Fu, and David Carradine, who at the time was not engaged in martial arts, played the role of a monk. Bruce wanted to play in the film, but received a categorical refusal from the studio. Lee's strong accent was cited as the reason, but many believe that the issue was ethnicity. In an interview with the Pierre Berton show, Lee said he understood Warner Brothers' attitude towards casting in the series.
Business-wise, it's a risk. And I don't blame them, I mean, in the same way, it's like in Hong Kong, if a foreigner come and became a star, if I were the man with the money, I probably would have my own worry of whether or not the acceptance would be there. But that's all right, because if you honestly express yourself, it doesn't matter, see?
In 1970, the collaboration between Lee and Raymond Chow, who recently founded his own film company, Golden Harvest, in Hong Kong, began. Despite the small fee of only $7.6 thousand per film, Chow promised the actor a short-term contract, which was important for Bruce. They agreed on only 2 films, but it was from their collaboration that the birth of a true legend began. In 1971, Lee starred in the film The Big Boss. Filming took place in the city of Pakchong. The conditions were very bad. Humid, hot climate, cockroaches, and a lack of normal food. Bruce lost his voice due to the fact that during filming he constantly had to shout over the noise of the city. Besides, he injured his back, and after each shot of a fight scene, the actor needed a long rest. Bruce wrote about his experience. First, I sprained my shin when I landed on the mat after a high jump, so I had to spend over 2 hours traveling to the doctor in Bangkok. As a result, I caught the flu during this trip. It was terribly hot in Bangkok. However, shivering with chills, with a fever, and dragging my leg, I filmed the last fight. Despite all the troubles and inhuman filming conditions, the movie was a huge box office success throughout Asia and brought Bruce long-awaited recognition and fame. One of the journalists wrote, "This film is Bruce Lee's best acting work in his entire career. This is one of the most outstanding examples of the manifestation of its most ancient roots in a person. It is rather the movements of a surprisingly flexible and graceful animal than a person. I believe that this film can take its rightful place among the best films of Clint Eastwood, Steve McQueen, and James Bond." The movie broke all previously known records both in China and in such cities as Rome, Beirut, and Buenos Aires. Everything that Bruce dreamed of, everything that he had assured his friends and companions, everything that he had intended to do, everything was now achieved, or at least one step closer to the goal.
朝安，你都有分兩度噶嘛，喺鄉下玩過下。我阿媽叫我抬住佢，唔准我同人打交。
At the same time, after the Longstreet release, Bruce's popularity in America also increased. Now, Paramount and Warner Bros. Studios, which previously did not want to deal with the Chinese actor, bombarded him with offers. Nevertheless, Paramount persuaded Lee to shoot 3 more episodes of Longstreet. In 1972, Bruce's new film, Fist of Fury, was released, which broke the box office records previously set by the big box. However, not everyone greeted it kindly. Criticism was mainly directed at the film's director, Lo Wei. Bruce was disappointed with Lo Wei's direction and soon expressed it publicly. Bruce's only desire was to make a good film, and he was terribly tormented by the fact that the script was, frankly, weak, and during the shooting reigned in outright chaos. However, almost no one doubted the film's future success, especially among the Chinese audience. Bruce's technique in this movie was even better than in Big Boss, and his kicks and jumps were even more dramatic. Lee also used nunchucks for the first time in the film, the effectiveness of which was demonstrated by him in all its glory. The picture contained only action and violence. Glorifying violence, what could be worse? That's why I insisted that the character I played die at the end of the film. He killed many people and had to pay with his life for it. Many Chinese did not like the ending of the film at all, but there were many more fans of the film and its main star.
告诉你，我陈真杀人偿命，与金武馆无关。是。
The actor became so popular that a simple outing to a movie or a restaurant always ended with obsessive requests for an autograph and a complete lack of privacy. That's why Bruce began to appear in public less and less and spend more and more time at home. Fist of Fury made Bruce perhaps one of the most desirable actors in the world of show business, especially for producers. In the Philippines, for example, the film ran for 6 months, and the government was forced to eventually reduce the number of imported films to protect local film companies. In Singapore, as in Hong Kong, speculators received huge funds by selling dollar tickets for 18. Producers from all over the East began to offer Bruce money. It was definitely the cheapest way for them to make money using his popularity. Others simply sent people to the door with large sums of money, which the star refused to accept. Soon, Hong Kong was flooded with martial artists hoping to repeat the star's success. This annoyed him very much because they had no idea what sacrifices they would have to make to achieve their goals. Explaining why he wanted to be the best representative of martial arts, Bruce especially emphasized that his daily training was a minimum of 2 hours, which included running for 4 miles and more, flexibility exercises, practicing techniques in different conditions, hitting a punching bag, and much more. Every day, he ran out of his home in Hong Kong, keeping his head as low as possible to avoid being recognized. Of course, fame had its sweet side. An actor, for example, could afford to buy luxury cars. Bruce never hid his love for cars, although his greatest love was books. He never considered them as an inseparable part of the interior, but saw them primarily as a source of ideas, philosophical, and religious principles. Besides, the actor loved beautiful clothes and enjoyed buying them, and the Lee couple loved seeing Bruce's photos in newspapers and on the covers of magazines from all over the world. However, Lyndon noted that if these photos were not there, it would not have upset him much. In the last 2 years of his life, Bruce often came home from the studio in a depressed state, violently experiencing problems that arose during work. Sometimes he became terribly upset when he suddenly found that he was physically unable to carry out something he had planned. It was at this time that he began to suffer from insomnia. When he was working at the studio and things didn't work out for him, Bruce often called home and asked his wife to come to him. "I don't think I could have done anything significant for him," said Linda, "but being around him, I had a soothing effect on him. In general, I'm sure that each of us did everything possible to strengthen our relationship. We each played our part as well as we could, and perhaps we impressed each other by doing much more for the other than we could have imagined at the beginning of our married life." After finishing work on The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, Bruce was no longer bound by any contract. The success of these films once again convinced the actor that he should create a film that could earn public recognition and, at the same time, make people respect the world of martial arts even more. Lee had to endure a long and hard struggle to reach the level he was now, but he was aware that it would be very difficult for him to stay at the top, and it would require additional superpowers from him. The actor seriously worked on another script presented to him by the studio Golden Harvest, namely Yellow-Faced Tiger, but later he refused it. Bruce believed that each film should be much better than the last, and he felt that the only way he could achieve the best was his personal control over all stages of work on the film, including the script, selection of actors, costumes, location, filming, etc. He decided to found his own film company, Concord, and work together with Raymond Chow. He always felt dissatisfied with the working methods of local film companies, where directors, as a rule, started shooting a movie with only drafts of the script in hand and coming up with a story already during the shooting. The story, in turn, was based on the successful scenarios of old films or on the fantastic legends of Asia. Bruce insisted that the script meet Hollywood's standards, but when he made several comments about the Yellow-Faced Tiger script, Luo Wei refused to listen to him, and Bruce knew that they had to go their separate ways. It was a risk, but Lee felt this decision was the right one. He bought a few books on filmmaking and began honing his stage skills. Bruce believed that Chinese films had almost no soul. The director only tried to stick to the existing main plotline. Besides, the actor wanted to give each hero a completely new character in each subsequent film. He was aware that the audience wanted to see him primarily in fights, but his character also had to be deeper and more interesting. These ideas motivated him to his own film production. It was decided that Lee would write the scripts, direct the shooting process, and star in his own film. In other words, he would do everything by himself, which was an extraordinary phenomenon in the world of the film industry. In the end, Bruce settled on the script Way of the Dragon, and as soon as he decided on his choice, he immediately began to work out all the details. It took weeks just to discuss and prove the script. Many times he went to the location of future filming and also constantly consulted with the assistant director. All ideas were then discussed with Linda, and sometimes this led to Bruce suddenly having new ideas out of the blue. From the beginning, Lee was convinced that filmmaking was a mixture of art and commerce, and the fact that he invited U.S. karate champions Chuck Norris and Bob Wall with him to Italy and Hong Kong was as much an aesthetic solution to the problem as a commercial one. The actor believed that the Chinese would appreciate the scenes of a fight between heroes of different nationalities. But the most important thing for Bruce was that he could work with professional karate fighters instead of actors, because he believed that this would add even more drama and believability to the film. By the way, we have a biography of Chuck Norris and many other iconic actors on our channel. To learn a lot of interesting stories about the shooting of your favorite films and stars' personal dramas, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and press the bell button. For most of those who have seen Way of the Dragon, the fact that the Chinese kung fu movie was shot in Rome and the key scene was in the Colosseum may have seemed the strangest thing. The fact is that when Raymond Chow, Bruce's partner in the film production, noted that he had connections in Rome with people who could help them with technical equipment, costumes, and scenery, Bruce immediately agreed. It promised great opportunities, but with it, great problems. First of all, it was necessary to build a logical storyline to make the film believable. In addition, filming took place mainly in crowded places, on the streets, at the airport, on the outskirts of Rome, during rush hours, and even in bad weather. Bruce constantly demanded perfection, both from himself and his colleagues. No wonder many complained that he was very difficult to work with, but he always knew what he wanted and how to get it. The working conditions on the film were extremely tough. The shooting took place at a fast pace, 14 hours a day and 7 days a week. Within 2 weeks, everything that was planned to be shot in Rome was shot, and the whole crew returned to Hong Kong to continue working. Staging fights was Bruce's privilege and specialty. According to his vision, everything had to look perfect. At first, every fight was planned on paper, every move from every angle. So, for example, his last duel with Chuck Norris required 20 pages of instructions. Everything was planned very carefully. Bruce came up with all the moves himself in his study at home, and Linda often helped him by playing Norris. He would get a sudden inspiration and yell, "Come on, let's try this." Then we'd try all the movements and he would write them all down. To make his task easier, Bruce installed mirrors along one wall at home. At the same time, he constantly looked at the best angle to shoot this scene so that it was spectacular and convincing. He was constantly inventing something new, using different kung fu techniques, because each fight had to be different from all the previous ones ever filmed. The fight scenes he designed were truly stunning. All of them differed from each other and were intended only for a certain character in the film. After all the movements were carefully thought out, the moment came when it all had to be put together with the partners, taking into account their weight, height, and strength. Bruce also used various cold weapons. A stick in one scene, nunchucks in another. He made his own throwing darts and also used them in the film. The fight scenes in which he was assisted by extras who were not professional actors required special preparation. None of Bruce's punches actually made contact with the person, and it was only visually that the punches seemed to hit the target. Of course, this demanded from everyone exceptional clarity and movements precision achieved through countless repetitions. When the film was finished, new difficulties began. The Hong Kong censors launched a new campaign against cruelty and violence in films. Fortunately, the censors insisted on removing only one small piece, which was then restored for the film's screening overseas. In it, Bruce repeatedly kicked Chuck Norris in the head 5 times. There was another notable groundbreaking moment in this film. In most of their films, Chinese producers used music already recorded by an orchestra, but this time, Bruce sat in front of the recording devices and played the percussion instruments. He completely controlled the entire work on the film. Not a single detail escaped his attention. Dubbing, setting the scenery, choosing costumes, and finally the editing. Lee had to watch the film in total several hundred times, both in separate pieces and in the finished form. Bruce was confident that this film would be more successful than his 2 previous works, at least in Hong Kong. He predicted that the box office would cross the 5 million Hong Kong dollars mark. No one believed him, and the press, learning about Lee's ambitious hopes, only mocked him. Bruce ignored these attacks, and when Way of the Dragon ended up crossing the Hong Kong $5 million mark, he was very happy to be proven right. Success served as a push for his further work. During the time when Bruce voiced and edited Way of the Dragon, he changed his appearance a bit, letting go of the small mustache and stubble. He was barely recognized on the street, work was going well, and Lee was happy about the lack of public pressure. When asked about cooperation with other Chinese companies, Bruce always answered, "If I'm given a good script, I'll think about it. I want to be myself, and I will work with any studio that will give me that opportunity, and that requires quality scripts. I don't want to be involved in local conflicts, in the mutual struggle of local film companies." After Bruce finished working on the film Way of the Dragon, he intended to rest for a while and then started working on another film of his own, Game of Death. He didn't have a script yet, but only had a vague idea to gather the best representatives of martial arts and shoot a movie with their help. Later, Lee learned that his friend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, an American professional basketball star, had come to Hong Kong. Bruce sent him a letter in which he offered to star in his film. Bruce decided that it was difficult to think of anything more mysterious to the audience than his fight with an opponent who was almost 2 heads taller than him. Kareem responded with great enthusiasm to this offer, and within a week they had filmed one of the most fantastic fights ever shooted. The fight scenes in Game of Death greatly depleted Bruce's seemingly limitless reserves of energy, given the fact that he had practically no rest after the grueling work on the film Way of the Dragon. However, when they were filmed, the future script was just emerging in his head, and Lee happily set to work on it. He assumed that he would be able to finalize it within a few months. The film plot was based on the fact that there were treasures on the top floor of a pagoda in Korea. It was the pagoda where martial arts masters trained, with each floor having a master who preached one style or system. Climbing floor after floor, the actor had to fight with each master separately until he reached the last one with the treasure, which was supposed to be guarded by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It was this part of the film that Bruce managed to shoot still being alive. While Lee was diligently working on the script, he received lucrative offers from everywhere. Run Show offered him an open contract, that is, without any restrictive conditions from the producer and director. Later, they agreed on 2.5 million Hong Kong dollars. Carlo Ponti and many other Italian producers sent him their offers by telegraph. The stars also offered the cooperation of several Hollywood film studios at once, including Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which wanted Bruce to play in their film together with Elvis Presley. But the actor resolutely refused all these offers, believing that now he could take his time with the choice. All that happened to me did not change my essence because I always felt that something would happen in my life that would break existing records, even if I did not yet realize in what field. This does not mean that I became cocky or better than I was. No, I'm the same shit I was before. Then the vice president of Warner Bros., Fred Weintraub, offered Bruce a joint project on which he had been working for several years. Initially, the script was called Blood and Steel. Later, it was renamed Enter the Dragon. Warner Bros. Agreed to co-finance the movie with Bruce's film company. Initially, the film budget was $500,000. As a result, it cost $800,000. This was relatively modest by Hollywood standards, but it was a huge amount for China. In February 1973, the film crew arrived in Hong Kong where during 10 weeks of grueling work, they shot the picture. Initially, it was planned to spend less time on filming, but during the shooting there were several unfortunate incidents that slowed down the work process. The first happened when Bruce badly injured his hand while filming a fight with Bob Wall. When staging a fight with bottles, the actor had to move with extreme care and precision. Unfortunately, during one of the takes, he hit so fast that Bob didn't have enough time to put the bottles down. Bruce's bare fist crashed into the jagged shards of the bottle, causing him to bleed profusely. A week passed before the actor was able to get back to work. In another scene, Bruce had to grab a cobra which suddenly bit him. Fortunately, it wasn't poisonous, but it was not a very pleasant experience for the actor. Besides other troubles, there were also inevitable clashes with the masters involved in the filming. Many of the extras also challenged the actor to a duel, and after Lee accepted the challenge and the opponents ended up on the floor, newspapers wrote about the star's cruelty to his colleagues. The film crew also encountered a number of difficult problems while working on the film. Disorientation, fatigue after the flight, climate change, food, lifestyle, surrounding culture. All this did not contribute to a good rhythm of work and mood. Besides, everything had to be assembled and built on the spot from almost nothing. Fortification structures and houses were made by the hands of hundreds of Chinese carpenters and workers. 7 praying mantises were flown in from Hawaii for the scene, which lasted just 20 seconds. The Americans were in awe of how the Chinese could do so much out of nothing and in such a short period of time. However, international misunderstandings arose between the crew members due to different languages and social views. The film exceeded its planned budget, but when the executives of Warner Bros. First saw it, they immediately realized that the film would bring them enormous income, and therefore, without much debate, they gave the director their consent for an additional sum of $50,000 for the music design and sound effects. By the end of April 1973, Bruce decided that he would return to America, where life was less stressful. And maybe twice a year, he would go to Hong Kong and make his films there, because there it was easier for him to control everything and his authority was undeniable, and therefore he had more freedom in the process of working on films. Lee often complained to his wife that all the inconveniences caused by fame and success and the constant interest of the public in him led to the fact that he began to quickly lose his energy. In May 1973, at the Golden Harvest studio, Bruce lost consciousness for the first time. He started having convulsions, and it was decided to take the actor to the hospital. For several hours, he was on the verge of life and death, and doctors did everything possible to save the actor. Later, he got better and could recognize his wife. Bruce's first words after regaining consciousness were to admit that he felt death creeping up on him. Then he kept telling himself, "I'm going to fight this. I'm going to get over myself. I'm not going to give up." A week later, the Lee couple flew to Los Angeles, where a group of doctors conducted a series of tests and carefully studied the work of Bruce's brain in different modes and under different conditions. They did not find any damage in the whole body of the patient, except brain swelling. Returning to Hong Kong, Bruce again began to work on The Game of Death. However, it was still impossible to avoid stress. He was upset by the memoirs of Ip Man's son that appeared in the press, which contained many inaccuracies about his younger years. Furthermore, at that time, Lee was credited with another romance with actress Betty Pye, who was to star in his last film. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce and Raymond Chow visited Betty to discuss the script for the upcoming film. During the conversation, the actor had a severe headache. Pye, as a caring hostess, brought a pill for a headache to a guest, which he drank. Betty led him into the bedroom so he could lie down for a while, turned off the light, and returned to Chow in the living room. Later, she decided to check on Bruce and knocked on the door, but no one answered her. The woman found Lee unconscious and called an ambulance. Bruce was taken to the hospital, but he was already in a coma. Doctors fought for his life, but they could not save him. On the same day, Bruce Lee passed away. This event was a huge shock for the world community and a tragedy for millions of fans of the Kung Fu legend. 5 days later, his wife Linda returned to her native Seattle and buried her husband's body in Lakeview Cemetery. The star's funeral, on July 25, 1973, was attended by Taki Kimura, Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Dan Inosanto, Peter Chen, and Lee's brother Robert. Enter the Dragon was released after the actor's death.
We'll give you anything you need. Electronic equipment, weapons, anything. Drink?
No thanks. Guns. Now, why doesn't somebody pull off 45 and bang, settle it?
No guns.
The film director Robert Klaus, along with Golden Harvest, revived Lee's unfinished Game of Death. Lee shot over 100 minutes of footage for the movie before filming was halted. Klaus finished the picture using similar and archival footage of Lee from his other films with a new storyline and cast, which was released in 1978. However, it only contained 15 minutes of actual footage of Bruce, while the rest featured Lee's body double, Kim Tai-chung, and Yuen Biao as understudy.
Action!
Unused footage shot by Lee was recovered 22 years later and included in the documentary Bruce Lee, A Warrior's Journey. To many, Bruce Lee was somewhat of an invincible Superman, but he considered himself an ordinary man.
Bruce would be most proud to say, and to have people say about him, that he was a real human being who communicated the truth of his art through his actions and his presence on the screen. That people could look at him and say, wow, that guy was real. I know he could do that thing. He could make those moves. He would be deadly if he were in person right here in front of me. They knew that about him. Maybe they're not able to say that or express exactly what it was about him that turned them on so much or inspired them. But it was because he was the genuine article. He was that person in the films. He was not a different person off screen than he was on screen.
The achievements of this movie star are still praised by many. That is why the actor's homeland, Hong Kong, installed a monument to him on his 65th birthday. A day before its opening, a similar monument appeared in Zrnjevac Park in Mostar, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Also, an almost 2-meter figure of Bruce Lee was installed in the Chinatown of Los Angeles. The largest is a 20-meter statue of Bruce, installed on the territory of the Bruce Lee Paradise Park in the Chinese city of Shunde, where the ancestors of the martial arts master's parents come from. Although Bruce Lee died very early, at the age of 32, even after his death, he continued to have a significant influence on modern martial arts, including judo, karate, mixed martial arts, and boxing, as well as on modern popular culture, film, television, comics, animation, and video games. And Time magazine called him one of the 100 most outstanding people of the 20th century. Bruce Lee has truly become a legend for millions, and his death is a blow and a loss for all lovers of martial arts and cinema. The actor passed away so unexpectedly that his fans had many theories about what actually happened on that fateful day. We also conducted our research, in which we tried to show all the possible reasons for the legend's death. So, click on the video that appeared on the screen and learn more about the last days of the actor's life. We hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, like it and see you soon. You are watching the Biographer channel. Until next time.